Lipstick liar Crockett. That's how President Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, spits venom at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett right inside a heated hearing. But this isn't just name-calling. It's a political battlefield. In a nation where 1 in 3 Americans say they've lost faith in government, Trump wields power like a weapon. And standing against him, Jasmine Crockett, a fierce voice for justice, accused, mocked, and underestimated. Every word in that chamber isn't just debate, it's war. A war over truth, a war over power, a war that will decide whether justice is protected or destroyed. 2 names, 1 clash, Donald Trump versus Jasmine Crockett. And what you're about to witness will shake the very core of America. The gavel cracked once, sharp and loud, but it could barely cut through the storm already brewing inside the chamber. The hearing had only just begun, and yet the air was thick with hostility, as if decades of frustration had chosen this single morning to erupt. Trump leaned back in his chair, lips curled into that familiar smirk, eyes scanning the room like a predator who already believed he owned the cage. Then with a sneer that dripped arrogance, he fired the first shot. "Clown of Congress!" The words exploded across the room like shrapnel, bouncing off the wooden panels, caught by every microphone, every camera, every reporter's trembling fingers. It wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of war. Jasmine Crockett froze for only half a second, long enough for the insult to pierce, but not long enough for it to settle. Her eyes narrowed, her chin lifted, and when she spoke, her voice cut sharper than any blade. "You dare call me a clown?" she snapped, her words slicing through the roar of whispers. "You are the President of the United States, yet you've turned this office into a stage for corruption and abuse." The chamber gasped, a wave of shock and excitement rolling through the crowd. Camera shutters clicked like gunfire. The gavel pounded again, but no one heard it anymore. Trump leaned forward now, his smirk replaced with a scowl, his voice dripping venom. "Corruption? Abuse? Don't talk to me about power, Crockett. You wouldn't last a day in this chair." But Jasmine was ready, her palms flat on the desk, her voice rising above the chaos. "I wouldn't last a day because I wouldn't sell out my people. I wouldn't twist the law to serve my ego. I wouldn't drag this country through the mud just to protect my empire." The words landed like punches, each one echoing in the stunned silence that followed. Then, like a match thrown into gasoline, the chamber erupted. Shouts from Trump's allies filled the air. Supporters of Crockett rose to their feet, clapping, yelling, chanting her name. The gavel slammed again and again, a desperate attempt to tame the inferno. Reporters leaned over desks, scribbling furiously. Cameras zoomed in on Trump's reddening face, on Jasmine's unwavering glare. Every second was broadcast live to millions of Americans who sat glued to their screens, hearts pounding, unable to look away. Trump raised a finger, stabbing the air like a weapon. "You want to talk about selling out? Look in the mirror. You're nothing but a puppet for radicals, for anarchists who want to tear this country apart." His voice thundered, shaking the very microphones that carried his words. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Her silence was louder than his rage. And then slowly, deliberately, she leaned into the mic. "No, Mr. President, I am not a puppet. I am the voice you can't silence, the truth you can't erase, and the justice you can't outrun." The room quaked. Her words rolled like thunder across the chamber. Even those who despised her couldn't deny the fire blazing from her stance. Trump slammed his fist against the table, his knuckles white. "Justice," he roared. "Don't lecture me about justice. I am justice. I am America." The arrogance was breathtaking, the audacity almost unbearable. Gasps filled the chamber, some in disbelief, some in fury, others in awe of just how far the man was willing to go. And Jasmine, her eyes blazing, struck back without hesitation. "No, Mr. Trump, you are not America. You are its shadow, and shadows vanish when the light arrives." The chamber erupted once more, a storm of cheers and jeers colliding into chaos. Security guards tensed, reporters nearly fell over each other, and the gavel was lost beneath the roar. In that moment, There were no rules, no order, no civility. There was only raw power, clashing in the form of two voices, two visions, two souls unwilling to yield. And as the shouting intensified, as the insults flew like daggers, as the entire nation held its breath, one truth became painfully clear. This was no ordinary hearing. This was a reckoning, and the fire had only just begun to burn. Trump leaned forward, his jaw clenched, his face flushed red with fury and pride. The cameras caught the glint in his eyes. Not fear, but the dangerous arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. He spat the words like venom, every syllable dripping with disdain. Liar and lipstick! The insult cracked through the chamber like a whip. Gasps burst out. A few of his allies laughed, slapping the table, feeding on the theater of cruelty. Others shifted uneasily, aware that every microphone was live, every word preserved forever in history. Jasmine did not move. She didn't flinch, didn't roll her eyes, didn't give him the satisfaction of reaction. Her stillness was louder than his insult. And then she leaned forward, her tone measured, her words deliberate, like a surgeon with a scalpel. Mr. President, she began, her voice smooth but sharp, lipstick doesn't lie. Power does. And your record, your lies, they speak louder than anything I could ever say. The room stiffened. Trump's smirk faltered for just a second. Jasmine didn't wait. She pounced. You told the American people you had nothing to hide, yet you've buried documents, gagged witnesses, and bent this nation's laws until they nearly broke. Her hands slammed a folder onto the desk, papers fanning out like blades. These are not rumors. These are facts. Your facts. The chamber erupted again, but this time the noise was different, sharper, hungrier. Reporters craned their necks. Photographers surged forward. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, hearts racing. Trump sneered, his voice rising above the roar. Facts? Don't make me laugh. This is the same garbage your party has been throwing for years. Lies, hoaxes, witch hunts. His allies cheered, pounding fists on the desks, trying to drown out the rising tide of doubt. But Jasmine didn't let go. A witch hunt? She fired back, eyes locked on him like steel. No, Mr. Trump, witches hide in shadows. You brag in daylight. You've stood on podiums in front of millions and said the quiet parts out loud. And now you want to pretend none of it happened. The chamber roared. The sound was deafening, like a stadium split in half. One side erupted in cheers, fists pumping, voices echoing Jasmine's defiance. The other side screamed back, red-faced, veins bulging, their rage like fuel poured onto the fire. It was no longer just a hearing. It was a battlefield. The chairman's gavel thundered, desperate, useless. Order! Order! He shouted, his voice lost in the chaos. But the chaos had no master now. Trump leaned back again, trying to regain composure, waving dismissively at Jasmine as though she were nothing more than a gnat buzzing around his throne. You don't scare me, Crockett, he hissed. You'll never scare me. You don't have the power. Jasmine rose to her feet. Her height didn't match his bulk, but her presence towered over him. Her voice rang out, clear and unshaken, cutting through the chamber like lightning splitting the sky. I don't need power to scare you. I only need the truth. And the truth terrifies you. The crowd erupted again, louder than before. Some cheered until their throats cracked. Others shouted curses until they turned red. The tension bled into the audience seats where citizens, voters, activists, skeptics had been invited to witness. An old man in the back shouted, "Enough lies!" while another screamed, "Leave our president alone." Two women clashed in the gallery, voices high, pointing fingers at each other until security stepped in. It wasn't just the chamber now. It was the whole nation, boiling over, splitting apart in real time. Trump rose too, towering, his voice a growl that shook the walls. You want to talk about lies? You stand there pretending to care about the American people when all you care about is yourself. You're a fraud, Crockett. A fraud. His finger jabbed the air, shaking with rage. But Jasmine only smiled. Cold, sharp, devastating. If I were a fraud, you wouldn't be sweating, Mr. President. The camera zoomed in. His brow glistened under the lights, his jaw clenched tighter, his breathing heavier. For a fleeting second, America saw not the unshakable titan he claimed to be, but a man cornered, a man cracking. The hearing had spiraled far past politics. It was spectacle, it was theater, it was blood sport. And every second, every insult, every accusation was gasoline poured onto the blaze of division raging across the nation. This wasn't a clash of policy. This was pride against justice, arrogance against truth, and neither side had any intention of surrendering. As the shouting grew louder, as fists slammed desks, as the gallery nearly descended into a riot, the cameras rolled on. Tens of millions of eyes stayed locked on the screen, and somewhere deep inside that chamber, one truth became undeniable. The fire had leapt from the words of two combatants and into the veins of a country, and America would never be the same. The tension was suffocating. The air felt electric, as though one spark could ignite an explosion. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, her tone deceptively calm. And then, with surgical precision, she delivered the blow. "Mr. Trump," she said, pausing just long enough for the silence to stretch like a rope around his throat, "if you claim to be the champion of truth, can you explain why over 34 times you publicly contradicted your own statements about classified documents?" The chamber froze. The number hit like a brick through glass. 34? Not 3, not 10. 34. Trump blinked. His mouth opened, then closed. His hand lifted, then dropped. For the first time in the entire hearing, he faltered. The silence was deafening. And then it shattered. Laughter erupted. Not polite chuckles, not hidden smirks. Full-throated, merciless laughter. Some lawmakers covered their mouths. Others didn't even try. Reporters nearly dropped their pens, muffling their own snickers. In the gallery, even those who had defended him moments earlier leaned back, shaking their heads, lips curled in disbelief. The cameras caught it all. Donald Trump, stammering, cornered, his face reddening under the heat of humiliation. That's fake news," he sputtered, his voice cracking like dry wood. "Those numbers are wrong. It's a setup." The laughter grew louder. It rolled through the chamber like thunder. And Jasmine, she didn't laugh. She didn't need to. She simply sat back, arms folded, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. The image was devastating. A woman calm, unshaken, while the so-called titan of American politics drowned in his own words. Trump slammed his hand against the desk, his voice booming, desperate to claw back control. "You think this is funny? You think mocking the President of the United States makes you clever?" The laughter slowed, replaced with murmurs, but the damage was already done. His voice cracked with fury, his pride bleeding out in front of millions. "This chamber should show respect to the office of the President. You are a disgrace, Crockett. A disgrace." He pointed at her like an executioner calling for the blade. His allies clapped, trying to salvage the moment, trying to shift the tide. But Jasmine rose, slow and deliberate, her presence commanding the room before she even spoke. Her voice rang out like a church bell in the middle of a storm. "Respect?" she asked, her tone slicing through the noise. "Mr. Trump, respect is earned. And a head of state who lies, who cheats, who twists the law for his own gain. Tell me, does that deserve respect?" The words struck like lightning. The laughter returned, sharper this time, edged with approval, with vindication. Trump's face hardened. He tried to speak, but Jasmine cut through again, her voice steady, merciless. "This isn't about titles. It isn't about crowns or thrones. It's about truth. And the truth doesn't bow to your office." The gallery roared, cheers now mixed with boos, the sound of a nation split in two, echoing within four walls. The chairman's gavel pounded, wood cracking against wood. But his calls for order dissolved into the storm. Trump's fist clenched, his jaw locked so tight a vein pulsed at his temple. He glared at Jasmine as though his fury alone could burn her down. But she stood, tall and unshaken, her voice soaring above the chaos. "I will never respect power built on lies, and neither should the American people." The chamber exploded again. Shouts, chants, cries of support and defiance. Some stood clapping until their hands ached. Others shouted until their throats tore. It was more than a hearing now. It was a reckoning broadcast live. Trump tried to recover, to grab the moment back, his hands raised high, his voice a roar. "You'll regret this, Crockett. History will remember you as the one who disrespected the presidency." But Jasmine only shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. "History will remember the lies, Mr. Trump, and history will remember the day you couldn't answer the simplest question." The chamber gasped. The laughter, the cheers, the chaos reached its peak. The camera zoomed closer, capturing every twitch in Trump's face, every ounce of fury he tried to mask. For a man who thrived on dominance, on control, on spectacle, this was the ultimate spectacle, and it wasn't his. It was hers. The humiliation was total. The wound, public and deep, and America was watching, every second etched into memory. This was no longer just a clash of two voices. It was a symbol of a nation tearing itself apart, between respect for power and demand for truth. And Jasmine Crockett had just seized the upper hand. But Donald Trump was never a man to surrender. His pride bled, his reputation cracked, yet his instinct screamed for a counterstrike. With a dramatic flourish, he reached under the desk, pulling out a thick folder bound in red. The camera zoomed, the chamber hushed. Papers rustled like whispers of conspiracy. "You want evidence?" Trump thundered, his voice clawing for dominance. "Here, proof. Proof that Crockett has been part of a conspiracy against your president." Gasps shot through the room. He scattered pages across the desk, shoving them toward the microphone, waving one above his head like a banner of righteousness. The papers bore seals, signatures, bold letters stamped classified. To the untrained eye, they radiated power, danger, and credibility. Trump's allies clapped furiously, shouting, "Read it! Read it! Show them the truth!" But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her gaze sharp, her voice carrying the weight of a scalpel. "Mr. Trump," she began, steady as stone, "if you truly held classified evidence, you would not be parading it on live television. That alone tells us these documents are nothing but props." The chamber stirred. Some smirked, others frowned. Reporters scribbled wildly, sensing blood in the water. Trump shook the paper harder, his face glowing red. "Lies! You're scared of what's in here. You're finished, Crockett." But Jasmine was already moving. She held up her hand, signaling to the clerk. Within seconds, the supposed classified pages were gathered, scrutinized. She flipped through them with practiced ease, her voice cutting through the silence. Page 3, wrong font. Page 7, signature doesn't match official records. And this stamp? Outdated since 2016. She tossed the papers back on the desk like scraps of trash. "These documents aren't classified. They're fabricated. Poorly fabricated. A cheap trick." The room erupted. Gasps, laughter, jeers. On the television screens across the nation, millions leaned closer, watching the moment unravel. On social media, a firestorm ignited. Fictional, Trump exposed, blazed across platforms, climbing faster than any headline of the year. Clips of Jasmine's calm dismantling of Trump's evidence flooded Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Wrong font. Fake stamp. Cheap trick. The phrases echoed like a chorus, tearing through the digital world with merciless speed. Trump's fist slammed against the table. The boom reverberated like a war drum. His voice rose, ragged with fury. "This is a setup, a witch hunt. You're all part of this crooked game. I am the President of the United States, and you will not mock me." Spittle flew with each word. His supporters roared in protest, but their voices were drowned out by the laughter, the gasps, the thunder of outrage from every corner of the room. Jasmine didn't shout. She didn't pound the table. She leaned forward, her tone low and steady, the kind of voice that carried more weight than any scream. "Mr. Trump, the American people are not fools. They are watching, they are listening, and they can see the truth for themselves." The gallery broke into applause. The chairman's gavel cracked against wood, demanding order, but the energy was uncontainable. Trump's face twisted. The mask of confidence shattered, leaving only raw rage. He stood, towering over the desk, pointing an accusing finger at Jasmine. You think you've won? You think exposing a few papers makes you righteous? No, you're nothing but a liar in lipstick. The insult hung in the air, bitter and ugly, but it didn't land the way he wanted. The crowd hissed, some booed, others laughed in disgust. The phrase turned back on him, echoing through social media within seconds. Liar in lipstick trended alongside near Trump exposed, used not to attack Jasmine, but to mock the president's desperation. Crockett didn't so much as blink. She let the insult hang, let it sour, and then delivered the dagger. When the truth threatens a liar, they always reach for insults. But insults can't hide forgery, they can't erase corruption, and they won't protect you from accountability. The words landed like hammer blows. The hearing room was no longer just a stage. It was a battlefield, and Trump's weapon had backfired in front of the world. On television screens in living rooms, diners, and airports, Americans shook their heads. Some shouted at their screens, others cheered, but nearly all felt the same growing sense. Something historic was unfolding before their eyes. Trump pounded the desk one final time, his roar cracking through the chamber. "This isn't over! You will regret crossing me!" But his voice no longer commanded, it pleaded, and Jasmine Crockett stood silent, arms folded, the embodiment of calm in the storm. The image seared into the nation's memory, a president flailing, a congresswoman unshaken, and a people awakening to the fraud that had been laid bare. This wasn't just evidence. This was the first battle, and it had been won. But Donald Trump was not finished. Defeat burned like acid in his chest, and if his forged documents had crumbled, he would reach for another weapon: slander. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed, lips curling into a smirk that tried to mask desperation. "You think you're clean, Crockett?" he sneered, voice dripping with venom. "Tell America how much money you've pocketed from shady donors, foreign interests, backdoor deals. You're nothing but a bought mouthpiece dressed up in cheap righteousness." The chamber gasped. Reporters jolted upright, pens scratching furiously. Cameras zoomed in on Jasmine's face, waiting for a crack, a flicker of fear. But she didn't flinch. She stood, calm as ever, her voice steady, resonant, and sharp as a blade. "Mr. Trump, I have nothing to hide. Unlike you, my records are transparent. My campaign finances are public, audited, and clean." She held up a stack of documents, neatly bound, the kind that glowed with legitimacy. "Every dollar is accounted for. Every donor is vetted. And not a cent, not 1 cent, comes from illegal sources." She slid the binder across the desk. Clerks pounced, distributing copies to the committee. Within seconds, the room buzzed as pages flipped. Eyes scanned, heads nodded. The truth stared them in the face. Jasmine Crockett's finances were spotless. Trump's jaw tightened. His allies shifted in their seats. And then, like jackals sensing their leader's weakness, they lunged. One Republican senator rose, voice sharp, theatrical. "Even if the money's clean, her votes prove loyalty to radical agendas." Another shouted over him. "She's funded by the far left, the enemies of America's values." A third slammed the table. "We all know transparency means nothing if she's covering for hidden strings." The chamber erupted in noise, a storm of accusations and half-truths. They circled Jasmine like wolves, voices overlapping, each trying to bury her under a landslide of mud. But Jasmine Crockett was no prey. She let them bark, let the noise rise, and then cut through with the precision of an arrow. "You call this justice? A pack of grown men ganging up to drown out a single woman's voice? Is this what truth looks like to you? Volume over evidence? Slander over proof?" Her words sliced through the chaos. For a moment, even her attackers faltered. She pressed on, relentless. "You want to talk about radical agendas? Look at who defended white supremacists in Charlottesville. Look at who tried to silence black voices at the ballot box. Look at who called justice a witch hunt every time the law came knocking." Each line was a blade, piercing deeper, cutting through the fog of lies. The gallery roared, cheers thundered, drowning out the jeers. Hashtags exploded online once again. Truth vs. Trump trended alongside Das Trump Exposed, with millions quoting Jasmine's words as if they were battle hymns. Trump slammed his fist against the table again, desperate to regain control. His allies shouted louder, but their fury now seemed hollow, brittle, forced. And Jasmine? She stood alone, unshaken, her voice carrying above them all. You will not smear me into silence. You will not bury truth beneath lies. Every accusation you throw, I will answer with proof. Every insult, I will answer with facts. And every attempt to break me will only prove why I fight. The words rang like iron. One by one, her opponents faltered, their shouts reduced to mutters, their gestures to nervous fidgets. For every stone they hurled, Jasmine had turned it back into a weapon, sharper, deadlier, unstoppable. The cameras devoured the moment. Millions of Americans watched her stand alone, defiant, surrounded yet unbroken. And in living rooms across the nation, people whispered the same thought. She's fighting for us. Trump scowled, teeth clenched, sweat glistening under the lights. His fury was volcanic, but his power, his dominance, was slipping piece by piece. And Jasmine Crockett, one voice against the storm, had turned their dirty play into her triumph. This was no longer just politics. This was survival. And Jasmine had just proved she could not be broken. But Donald Trump, wounded and cornered, chose to strike lower than ever before. If facts couldn't save him, if forged papers couldn't protect him, he would turn to the oldest, ugliest weapon in his arsenal, personal attack. His voice cut through the chamber, dripping with contempt. Look at her, he sneered, pointing with a cruel smile. This is who wants to lecture America? A woman from nowhere, dressed up like she matters. You think lipstick makes you powerful? You think your background gives you wisdom? Please, you are nothing. You'll always be nothing. The words struck like shards of glass, jagged and merciless. Gasps echoed. Even some of his own allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For a moment, silence hung heavy. And then Jasmine Crockett erupted. Her voice was not trembling, not shaken. It was fire. It was thunder rolling across the chamber, unstoppable and alive. Don't you dare, she roared, every syllable vibrating with raw fury. Don't you dare try to drown me with cheap, filthy insults about my face, my skin, or my story. I am here for one reason only, to strip your lies bare before the American people. The chamber exploded. Half the room leapt to their feet, clapping, shouting, roaring their approval. The other half jeered, booing, pounding fists against desks in protest. It was chaos, alive and breathing, the sound of a nation split in two contained within four walls. The chairman's gavel slammed again and again, wood cracking, but the voices only rose higher. Trump tried to cut her off, his voice a guttural growl. You're overreacting. You can't take a joke? You're too weak for this job. But his words backfired. Because the chamber had seen the venom, heard the disdain, felt the ugliness seep from his mouth, and Jasmine seized it, twisted it back into a weapon of her own. Weak, she shot back, her voice like lightning. Weak is hiding behind insults because you have no answers. Weak is dragging my background through the mud because you can't defend your corruption. Weak is a man who pretends to lead, yet fears the truth spoken by a woman. The crowd roared again. Supporters cheered so loud the walls trembled. Opponents booed with equal fury, fists in the air, voices raw. The tension was suffocating, the kind that makes every heartbeat feel like a drum of war. Cameras zoomed in, catching the fire in Jasmine's eyes, the sweat glistening on Trump's forehead. Two faces, two forces, locked in a battle no longer about policy or evidence, but about dignity, respect, and survival of spirit. Trump slammed his fist again, shouting over the noise, "You don't deserve to stand in this room." And Jasmine, without missing a beat, leaned forward and roared back, "I deserve to stand wherever the truth needs a voice, and today, that voice is mine." The line tore through the chamber like a cannon blast. Applause thundered, boos crashed, reporters scribbled, cameras flashed, every second immortalized, every word ricocheting across a nation hungry for spectacle, for truth, for blood. The atmosphere quaked with tension. the kind that felt ready to snap, ready to burst into something far beyond words. It was no longer just a hearing, it was a war zone, and the world was watching. This was the harshest clash yet, the dirtiest play, the rawest emotion laid bare. And from the ashes of insult and fury, a battle line was drawn deeper than ever before. The storm was only intensifying, and those who dared to look away risked missing history in the making, because Jasmine Crockett was done trading blows. Now she was ready to detonate. She reached beneath the desk, slid a stack of documents forward, and raised them high for all to see. Her voice sliced through the uproar with razor precision. "Mr. Trump, this is not opinion. This is evidence, and it leads directly to you." The chamber fell into a hush so sharp it was almost unnatural. Every camera zoomed in. Every pen froze above paper. Every breath was held. She flipped the first page open. Bank records, wire transfers, names, dates, and then the dagger. A direct payment from a lobbying group tied to oil conglomerates, funneled through shell accounts, arriving in the coffers of a Trump-aligned PS at the exact moment his administration had loosened critical environmental regulations. "This," Jasmine declared, her finger stabbing at the numbers, "is proof of collusion. Proof that policy was sold to the highest bidder. Proof that the American people were betrayed." The room shook. Gasps, murmurs, a low roar spreading like fire through dry grass. Trump's face flared crimson. He lunged for the microphone, his voice jagged, spitting with rage. "Lies, all of it. Fake paperwork, planted by the radical left." He jabbed a finger toward the Democratic side of the aisle, his chest heaving. "You're all corrupt, every one of you. Don't pretend this isn't the same garbage trick you've been pulling for years." But his voice cracked, raw, desperate. The image of a man in control was unraveling before millions of eyes. Crockett did not flinch. She turned another page revealing emails, correspondence between lobbyists and Trump's own advisors. The words glowed on the screen as aides projected them across the chamber walls. "Ensure deregulation passes. Payment will be processed within 48 hours. The silence was obliterated. People leapt from their seats, shouting, waving arms, the air thick with disbelief and fury. Trump slammed his fist down so hard the microphone screeched. "Shut it down, this is a witch hunt. You people are destroying America." But the more he raged, the clearer it became. He was cornered. The beast was thrashing, but the cage was closing. Crockett's voice cut back in, calm yet burning with fire. "Mr. Trump, the evidence speaks for itself. The numbers, the names, the timing, it is all here. And the American people are watching. They are not blind." Trump roared, turning not just on her, but on the entire panel. "You're all clowns. You don't deserve the seats you sit in. Fraudulent hacks, every last one of you." He hurled insults, ugly and venomous, at opponents, at the press, even at the chairman himself. The chairman banged his gavel over and over, but his hand shook, his voice cracked. "Order! Order! Order!" But there was no order left to claim. The chamber had become an arena, and the duel in its center had swallowed all rules, all decorum. Reporters whispered, fingers flying across keyboards. Cameras zoomed so close you could see every bead of sweat sliding down Trump's temple. And outside, on every television, every live stream, every phone, the words "breaking news" blazed across the bottom of the screen. By nightfall, headlines would roar the same phrase in unison: "The duel of the century." Because this wasn't politics anymore. It was theater, it was combat, and it was history being written live. One accusation, one rebuttal, one scream at a time. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady even as the chamber quaked. "You can shout, you can insult, you can curse, but you cannot erase what is written here, and you cannot silence me." The crowd erupted once more, half cheering, half booing, the air vibrating with tension so sharp it could split steel. Trump leaned back, seething, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white around the microphone. The tide had turned. The audience knew it. The press knew it. Even Trump, deep inside the furnace of his fury, knew it. This was no longer a hearing. This was survival on a stage where truth and lies wrestled naked before the world. And Jasmine Crockett had just tilted the battlefield. Trump knew it. He could feel the ground cracking beneath him. So he reached for the last weapon in his arsenal: manufactured witnesses. One by one, his legal team paraded them forward. Men in stiff suits, women with rehearsed lines, all sworn in under the solemn oath of truth. Each took their seat, hands raised, eyes darting nervously toward the cameras. Trump leaned back in his chair, a smirk twitching at his lips. "Let them speak," he barked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Let the world hear the truth." The first witness stammered through his statement, claiming that Jasmine herself had engaged in backroom dealings. But Crockett's eyes never left him. She leaned forward slowly, her voice calm, almost gentle, yet sharp as broken glass. "Sir, can you explain why your testimony today contradicts the email you sent just last year? The one where you described Mr. Trump's team as, quote, pressuring me to fabricate." The chamber went silent. A screen lit up. There it was, the very email, displayed in bold black letters for the world to see. The witness froze. Sweat trickled down his forehead. He shifted in his seat, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Crockett didn't stop. "Answer the question. Were you pressured to lie? Yes or no?" He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. I was told what to say." The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, the gavel pounding furiously but drowned by the roar. Reporters leapt to their feet, flashing cameras, their voices overlapping in a frenzy. Trump's face turned ghostly pale. His plan was unraveling in real time. But still, he slammed a fist against the table, shouting above the chaos. "That's not true. He's weak. He caved under pressure. This is a setup." But the words rang hollow. Even his most loyal allies shifted uneasily in their seats, because the lie had been cracked open and everyone had seen it bleed. The next witness tried to hold firm. He read his statement with mechanical stiffness, accusing Crockett of corruption. But Jasmine rose, holding up a thick folder. "Funny," she said, her voice slicing through his monotone, "because these financial records show every dollar I've ever received, and not 1 cent matches your claim. Care to explain that under oath?" The witness faltered, his hands trembling as he shuffled his papers. The camera zoomed in mercilessly. The nation watched as his facade crumbled in seconds. Another witness broke down mid-questioning, confessing that Trump's lawyers had fed him lines to memorize. His voice shook, his eyes glistening with tears, as he whispered the words no one expected. It was all a lie. The chamber shook again, louder, fiercer than before. Chants from the gallery thundered like drums. "Liar! Liar! Liar!" Trump shot up from his chair, veins bulging on his neck, his voice a ragged howl. "Shut up, all of you! This is a disgrace!" But his shouts were drowned beneath the tidal wave. Clips of the collapsing testimony spread instantly across the internet. Within minutes, hashtags trended worldwide. Trump exposed, witness breakdown, Crockett crushes, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Every feed ignited. Clips replayed on endless loop. The moment the witness admitted to lying, the moment Jasmine shoved the truth under the spotlight, the moment Trump lost control. And outside the chamber, America boiled. On city streets, people crowded around giant screens, watching history unfold like a live sports match. Bars erupted into cheers. Living rooms echoed with gasps. Phones lit up with texts, calls, disbelief. Trump slumped back in his seat, his hand gripping the table as though it might save him from sinking. His eyes darted wildly, searching for allies but finding only shadows. Crockett, by contrast, stood tall. Her voice rose once more, steady, unwavering, fierce. "Mr. Trump, your walls of lies are crumbling, and America is watching every brick fall." The words echoed like a hammer driving nails into a coffin, and Trump, for the first time, looked small. The wall had cracked, and with every confession, every viral clip, every chant from the streets, it was collapsing into rubble. This was no longer just a hearing. This was the undoing of a legacy built on deception, and the entire nation was watching it fall, piece by piece. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. She had sharpened her weapons, and now she was ready to cut deeper. Each strike a blade of truth, each revelation another wound Trump could not heal. The lights dimmed slightly as screens around the chamber flickered on. And then came the first blow. "Exhibit A," Jasmine declared, her voice carrying the weight of a gavel. Emails filled the screens, pages of them, written by Trump's inner circle, discussing backroom deals, secret payouts, coded exchanges about money and favors, names, dates, signatures, all laid bare under the merciless glow of the spotlight. Trump's jaw tightened, his eyes flickered back and forth, searching for a way out. But there was none. The second blow came fast. Jasmine pressed a button and audio filled the chamber. The president's voice, unmistakable, low and cutting, captured on a recording. "Make sure this disappears. I don't care what it costs." The words slashed through the silence like a knife. The audience erupted. Gasps, shouts, the clamor of a nation hearing betrayal from the man sworn to lead them. Trump's face turned crimson. He leaned into his microphone, but his voice caught in his throat. For the first time in the hearing, he was silent. Jasmine did not give him room to recover. The third blow fell like a hammer. A witness entered the chamber, unlike the manufactured puppets Trump had dragged in earlier. This one was real. This one was terrified, but honest. With trembling hands, she raised herself before the committee. Her testimony cut through the noise. Stories of direct orders from Trump, meetings in secret, threats whispered in corridors of power. Every detail matched the emails. Every word aligned with the audio. The chamber held its breath. And then, the witness spoke the sentence that would shake the earth. "He told me to lie. To the press. To Congress. To the American people." The silence shattered into chaos. Chairs scraped. Reporters surged forward. Cameras whirred like engines. The chairman pounded his gavel until it cracked. But it was no use. Because this was no longer a hearing. This was a reckoning. Trump sat frozen for 3 long seconds. And then, with the fury of a man cornered, he snapped, "Bullshit!" He bellowed, his voice echoing like a cannon blast. "All of it! She's lying! They're lying! You're all goddamn liars!" The profanity hung in the air like poison. Gasps filled the chamber. Some clutched their pearls. Others smirked, recording every syllable for the millions watching at home. In living rooms across America, people stared wide-eyed at their televisions. Parents shielded their children's ears. Seniors shook their heads in disbelief. Phones buzzed furiously as clips hit the internet within seconds. The hashtag spread like wildfire. Josh unfit president. It trended in minutes, not just in Washington, not just in America, but across the world. In London, screens and pubs replayed the moment again and again. In Tokyo, news anchors paused mid-broadcast to translate the president's outburst. In South Africa, crowds gathered, watching the collapse of a leader half a world away. Trump, oblivious or uncaring, grew more rabid with every passing second. He slammed his fists on the desk, his face twisted, spit flying from his lips. "I'm the president. I run this country. None of you can touch me." But every word only dug him deeper. Every shout painted him smaller, weaker, more desperate. Jasmine waited unflinching, letting him dig his own grave. And when his voice finally cracked, when his fury burned itself into exhaustion, she leaned forward with the final strike. Her words were calm, cold, deadly. "Mr. Trump, every curse you spit, every lie you scream, every outburst you fling only proves what the world now knows. You are unfit to lead, and history will write you down not as a president, but as a warning." The chamber shook again. Applause, fury, chaos, the sound of democracy ripping itself open. But beneath it all, one truth was undeniable. The blade of justice had been drawn, and Donald Trump was bleeding in full view of the world. But even a cornered predator fights hardest when the walls close in. And Trump, desperate and feral, lunged with one final weapon: fear. He slammed his fists against the table so violently the microphone screeched. His face glistened with sweat, crimson with rage. His voice thundered across the chamber, deep and guttural. "Listen to me," he roared. "If I'm still president tomorrow, I will cleanse this government. I will root out the traitors, the liars, the enemies within. No one will be safe from me." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Not a policy, not a defense, but a threat, a promise of purge. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some froze in shock, others leaned back as if scorched by fire. It wasn't just an outburst, it was a declaration. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, her hands steady, her voice low at first, so calm it was almost chilling. And then she unleashed. "A purge?" she echoed, her tone slicing with surgical precision. "You dare stand here under oath before the American people and call for a purge of your enemies? That isn't justice. That isn't leadership. That is the language of tyranny." Her words struck like hammers, each syllable echoing against the marble walls. "What you call a purge is nothing more than an attack on democracy itself. You threaten to cleanse this chamber, this government, this nation of anyone who dares oppose you. But what you are really saying, Mr. Trump, is that you want to cleanse it of truth." The silence was suffocating. Every camera was fixed on her. Every viewer at home leaned forward, holding their breath. Trump snarled, spittle flying. "Don't twist my words. They're the traitors. They're the frauds. And I'll show them no mercy." But Jasmine didn't flinch. She stepped forward, closing the space between them as though entering the arena for the final blow. "Mercy?" she snapped. "You don't get to speak of mercy when you've spent your power intimidating witnesses, silencing critics, and threatening the very soul of this republic. You call for purges, I call for accountability, and accountability always wins." The room was locked in tension, every heartbeat pounding like a drum. It was no longer argument, no longer debate. It was combat. Two gladiators in the heart of democracy, trading blows with words that cut deeper than swords. Trump leaned forward, his voice hoarse, guttural, desperate. "I'm still the president, and when I walk out of this chamber, I'll remind this country who's in charge." A shiver passed through the audience. The arrogance, the menace, the open contempt for the system itself. And then came Jasmine's reply, the one that sliced the air clean in half. "You're not in charge, Mr. Trump. The people are, and they've just witnessed the truth, unfiltered and undeniable. You can scream, you can threaten, you can pound your fists all you want, but the American people have seen what you are, and they will never unsee it." The chamber erupted. Cheers, shouts, thunderous applause. Others booed, furious, their faces red with rage. But it no longer mattered. The tide had shifted beyond repair. For the first time in the entire hearing, Trump sat back, his mouth open, but no words coming out. The fury that had fueled him sputtered, struggling to find oxygen in a room that no longer belonged to him. Jasmine's voice lingered in the air, heavy as judgment itself. "History does not bow to men who scream. It bows to truth. And today, truth has spoken." The cameras caught every moment. The stillness before the storm's last strike. The predator reduced to silence. The warrior standing unbroken. And across the nation, millions felt it in their bones. The end was close. The final blow was coming. The chamber was dead quiet, waiting, hungry for the killing stroke. Jasmine Crockett rose to her feet. Every movement was deliberate, measured, almost ceremonial. She stood tall, shoulders square, eyes blazing like the tip of a spear ready to pierce the heart of power itself. The silence was suffocating. You could hear the faint hum of cameras, the rustle of paper, the quickening breaths of those who knew history was about to be written in fire. She reached for the stack of folders in front of her. Slowly she pulled out a single document, and then another, and then another, laying them out like cards in a game where the stakes were nothing less than democracy itself. "This," she declared, her voice ringing through the chamber, "is the truth you've tried to bury." The screens around the room flickered alive once more. Not just emails, not just recordings, but bank transfers, direct connections, receipts with names, dates, signatures, each one tethering Donald Trump to a network of dark money and corrupt deals. For a moment, the president's face was blank, as if his very blood had been drained from his veins. His mouth twitched, opening and closing, but no sound came. The silence was louder than any outburst, and Jasmine pounced. Her voice thundered now, growing sharper with every word. "You told this country you were its champion. You told them you were their defender. But these papers, These numbers prove what you really are. A man who sold his office piece by piece, dollar by dollar, lie by lie. Gasps rippled like shockwaves across the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens trembling as though struggling to keep up with the weight of the moment. The gavel struck, but the chairman's call for order was nothing but background noise. Trump's face sagged, pale as wax. The fight had drained from his eyes, and in that instant, Jasmine delivered the words that carved themselves into history. "You are not the symbol of America. You are its stain." The chamber exploded. Thunderous applause crashed against the marble walls, drowning out everything else. Shouts of triumph rose like an anthem. Hands pounded tables. Feet stomped. The sound was primal, cathartic, like a nation screaming in unison through the throats of those inside the chamber. Trump slumped back in his chair, eyes wide, lips trembling. For the first time in his public life, he looked cornered. Not the predator, not the fighter, but the hunted. He tried to speak, to summon the rage that had carried him this far. But all that came was a rasp, a broken whisper drowned by the roar of voices celebrating his downfall. Jasmine stood firm, unmoving amid the chaos, her expression a mixture of fire and steel. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't joy, it was duty. "The American people deserve better," she said, her voice steady though the room quaked around her. "And today, they have seen the truth for themselves." Her words settled like a final gavel strike, resonating far beyond the chamber walls, carried by millions of screens into millions of homes. Across the nation, living rooms erupted with cheers, bars overflowed with shouts. On the streets, strangers hugged each other, crying out at televisions set up in shop windows. The roar of relief, of vindication, spread like a wave crashing over a weary people. Inside the chamber, Donald Trump sat diminished, his legacy bleeding out beneath the relentless spotlight. Every camera caught the image, the paling face, the hunched shoulders, the look of a man who had been dragged into the open and stripped bare. The crowd inside still roared, but beneath the thunder, one truth had become inescapable. This wasn't just the end of an argument. This was the death of a lie. And Jasmine Crockett had struck the killing blow. The gavel fell one last time. The chamber shook with noise. Cheers, shouts, a storm of voices that refused to be contained. The hearing was over, but the echo it left behind was louder than anything that had come before. Reporters bolted for the exits, phones pressed to their ears, already broadcasting the moment to every corner of the country. Cameras stayed locked on Jasmine, her figure lit like a statue carved in defiance, her words still reverberating as if carved into the very walls. The air crackled with history. Everyone could feel it. Something had shifted. The ground beneath American politics had cracked wide open. Jasmine sat finally, the weight of the battle still heavy on her shoulders, but her eyes told the story, steady, unbroken, and carrying the fierce light of someone who had not only survived, but conquered. To the public, she was no longer just a congresswoman. She was justice personified, a warrior who had faced power at its most corrupt and refused to bow. Outside, the streets had erupted. Crowds gathered in front of screens in Times Square, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, chanting her name. "Crockett! Crockett!" The chant rolled like thunder, swelling until it felt as though the whole country had taken a collective breath and chosen its champion. Meanwhile, Donald Trump emerged from the chamber. The cameras turned instantly, but the man who once thrived in the spotlight now looked fragile, diminished. His shoulders slumped, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously as though the world's gaze was too heavy to bear. The swagger was gone, the smirk, the bravado, all stripped away by the weight of the evidence that had gutted his image in front of millions. For the first time, Trump looked like what his critics had always claimed he was, a man desperate to hold on to a crumbling throne. The contrast was searing. Jasmine, the rising flame; Trump, the fading shadow. Yet even in defeat, he tried to muster defiance. His voice cracked as he spat words to the press, insisting it was all a witch hunt, vowing he would fight back harder than ever. But the words rang hollow. They clattered to the floor like dull coins, no longer carrying the weight they once did. The images told the truth better than his denials ever could. One figure walked out triumphant, shoulders high, eyes blazing with purpose. The other stumbled into the night, dragging behind him the chains of a legacy collapsing in real time. And America watched. In homes across the nation, families argued at dinner tables. Some called Jasmine a hero, the savior of democracy. Others clung to Trump's defiance, convinced the storm against him was a conspiracy. The country was split, but electrified. Social media pulsed like a beating heart. Clips of Jasmine's final words flooded timelines. "You are not the symbol of America. You are its stain." The video shattered records, shared millions of times within hours. Justice Strikes and Crockett Rising blazed across screens worldwide. But so too did the fury. Trump loyalists raged online, vowing vengeance, promising that the fight was far from over. America was awake, on fire, trembling with uncertainty. Inside the Capitol, as the crowd began to thin, Jasmine remained seated a moment longer. She looked out over the chamber, at the battered desks, the scattered papers, the cameras still buzzing. It felt less like victory and more like the opening of a new, more dangerous chapter. Because truth had been spoken, yes, but truth was never enough on its own. It needed to be carried, defended, protected from those who would twist it, bury it, drown it in noise. And Jasmine knew, with a weight that pressed against her chest, that this battle was only the beginning. She rose finally, walking out through the marble halls, greeted by a tide of cheers and flashing cameras. Her name was already etched into history books, but history was not finished with her yet. As for Trump, he vanished into the night, a fallen titan still clutching at the shards of his broken crown. Behind him trailed whispers of investigations, indictments, and the slow tightening grip of consequences long evaded. The storm was far from over. The nation stood at the edge of something vast, something uncertain. Would justice prevail? Would democracy endure? Or would the wounds torn open today bleed into something darker? No one knew, but one thing was certain. America would never be the same again. In the end, the clash between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump was more than politics. It was a mirror held up to a nation. It reminded us that power without truth is fragile, and that courage, even from a single voice, can ignite a movement that shakes the world. The lesson is simple yet eternal. Never bow to lies, never shrink before intimidation, and never forget that the strength of democracy lives in ordinary people who dare to demand integrity. Because in every age, justice depends on those willing to stand for it. If this battle between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump struck a chord, don't just move on. Pause, reflect, pass it forward. Like, comment, and share this story with someone who still believes truth should roar louder than power. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where no lie escapes the light. Hit the bell, because the next chapter of justice isn't quiet. It's fierce, and it may change how you see America itself. This is a fictional dramatization drawn from real wounds and real courage. Any resemblance to actual figures is symbolic, a mirror for public reflection and critique. Thank you for watching. Justice is never gifted, it is fought for. This is Harrison Stories.